The crystalline walls of the Zephyrian courthouse hummed with electric tension as Maya Chen stood in the defendant's pod, her small human frame dwarfed by the towering alien judges. The three-headed magistrate's middle mouth spoke the verdict in perfect English, each word dripping with disdain. Maya Chen of Earth, you have been found guilty of contaminating sacred Zephyrian soil with your inferior human biology. The sentence is death by mauling from Gorath, our ceremonial albino mammoth. Maya's legs trembled, but she kept her chin raised. Around her, the massive Zephyrians in the gallery chittered their approval. These beings stood 12 feet tall, their blue-scaled skin shimmering under the courtroom's harsh lights. Their elongated skulls housed brains twice the size of human ones, and they never let anyone forget it. The crime had been absurd. Maya had been part of a human diplomatic mission to Zephyr Prime, trying to establish trade relations. During a tour of their holy gardens, she had accidentally stepped off the designated path when a child had fallen into a decorative pond. She had rescued the drowning Zephyrian youngster, but in doing so, her boots had touched their sacred purple moss. The execution will take place tomorrow at dawn in the Colosseum of Justice, the magistrate continued. Gorath has not fed in 3 cycles. Your death will be swift, human. Maya closed her eyes, thinking of her younger brother back on Earth, of her parents who had sacrificed everything to send her to the Academy of Interspecies Relations. She had volunteered for this mission knowing the risks, but she had never imagined it would end like this. The Zephyrian guard captain, a particularly massive specimen named Vorthak, approached her pod with electromagnetic shackles. His 4 eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he spoke. Your species disgusts me, soft thing. Tomorrow you will learn why Zephyrians are the superior race in this galaxy. As the shackles closed around her wrists, Maya felt a strange calm wash over her. She had read about Gorath in the cultural briefings. The albino mammoth was a genetically modified creature, standing 20 feet tall with tusks that could pierce starship hull plating. It had killed 37 beings in the past decade, all enemies of the Zephyrian state. But as they led her to the holding cells beneath the courthouse, Maya began to remember something else from her academy training. Professor Williams had always said that humans had one advantage over every other species they had encountered: unpredictability. The cell was a cube of pure energy, impossible to escape from. Maya sat on the single bench and began to plan. She thought about her grandmother's stories of surviving the resource wars, about her great-grandfather who had somehow lived through the nuclear winter. Humans had always been survivors, even when the odds seemed impossible. Outside her cell, she could hear the Zephyrians making bets on how long she would last. Most gave her less than 30 seconds. A few generous souls wagered she might survive a full minute before Gorath crushed her fragile human bones. Maya smiled grimly. They were about to discover something that no alien species had yet learned about humanity. They were about to find out what happened when you backed a human into a corner with nothing left to lose. The night passed slowly, but Maya did not sleep. Instead, she exercised, stretching her muscles and running through every piece of survival training she had ever received. She meditated on the words of Sun Tzu, of Miyamoto Musashi, of every human warrior philosopher who had ever faced impossible odds. When the guards came for her at dawn, they found her standing calmly in the center of her cell, her eyes clear and focused. Vorthak sneered as he deactivated the energy bars. Ready to die, human? Maya looked up at the massive alien and spoke with quiet confidence. Ready to live. The Colosseum of Justice was packed with thousands of Zephyrians, all eager to watch the execution of the inferior human. The arena floor was covered in the bones of previous victims, bleached white by Zephyr Prime's twin suns. In the center stood a massive iron gate, behind which something enormous moved in the shadows. Maya was led to the center of the arena and left alone. The crowd's chittering grew louder as anticipation built. High above in the royal box, the Zephyrian emperor himself had come to witness the spectacle. His golden scales marked him as the oldest and most intelligent of his kind. The iron gate began to rise with a grinding shriek of metal. From the darkness beyond came a sound that made even the bloodthirsty crowd fall silent. It was a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the Colosseum, a sound of pure primal fury that spoke of death and destruction. Gorath emerged into the sunlight like a mountain given life. The albino mammoth was magnificent and terrifying, Its ivory tusks curved like ancient scimitars, each one longer than Maya was tall. The creature's hide was pure white, unmarked by scars despite decades of killing. Its small red eyes fixed on Maya with predatory intelligence, and its trunk swayed hypnotically as it tested the air for her scent. The crowd erupted in cheers as Gorath took its first thunderous step into the arena. Each footfall sent tremors through the ground that Maya could feel in her bones. The beast weighed at least 15 tons of pure muscle and rage, bred and trained for one purpose: killing enemies of the Zephyrian Empire. Maya stood perfectly still in the center of the arena, her human instincts screaming at her to run, but she had learned something important during her sleepless night in the cell. Running would only trigger Gorath's hunting instincts. The mammoth had been conditioned to chase fleeing prey, to gore them with those massive tusks before trampling their broken bodies into the arena floor. Instead, Maya began to walk slowly toward the approaching giant. The crowd's cheering faltered as confusion rippled through the stands. What was the human doing? Was she so terrified that she had lost her mind? Gorath rumbled in confusion as its intended victim approached rather than fled. The mammoth had never encountered this behavior before. Every previous victim had run screaming, their fear making them easy targets. But this small human walked toward death with steady steps and calm eyes. Maya remembered her training about earth mammals. Elephants, the distant ancestors of creatures like Gorath, were highly intelligent animals with complex social structures. They could feel emotions, form bonds, and most importantly, they could be reasoned with if approached correctly. She stopped 20 feet from the mammoth and slowly raised her empty hands. Gorath snorted and shifted its weight, clearly uncertain. The arena fell silent except for the creature's heavy breathing and the whisper of wind through the Colosseum's upper levels. "Hello, beautiful," Maya said softly, her voice carrying clearly in the stillness. "My name is Maya. I know you don't want to hurt me." The Zephyrians in the crowd began to hiss and chitter among themselves. This was not how executions were supposed to proceed. The humans should be screaming and dying, not having a conversation with their sacred executioner. Gorath's trunk stretched toward Maya, stopping just short of touching her. The mammoth's red eyes studied her with surprising intelligence. Maya could see confusion there and something else: loneliness. This creature had spent its entire life in darkness, brought out only to kill. It had never experienced gentleness or kindness. Slowly, carefully, Maya reached out and touched the tip of Gorath's trunk with her fingertips. The mammoth froze and a collective gasp rose from the crowd. No one had ever dared to touch the sacred executioner. Such an act was considered the highest form of blasphemy. "You're tired of killing, aren't you?" Maya whispered. "You're tired of being alone in the dark, tired of being feared and hated. I can see it in your eyes." Gorath's trunk curled around Maya's hand with surprising gentleness. The touch was brief, almost tentative, like a child reaching out for comfort. Maya felt her heart break for this magnificent creature that had been turned into a weapon. Emperor Zorthus rose from his throne in the royal box, his golden scales rippling with rage. His voice boomed across the arena through the amplification system. "What is this sorcery? Guard Captain Vorthak, explain why the human still lives." Vorthak stood frozen in the guard station, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief. "My lord, the creature appears to be malfunctioning. Perhaps the human carries some sort of technological device." "Impossible," the Emperor roared. The human was scanned thoroughly. "Execute Protocol 7 immediately." Maya heard the exchange and her blood ran cold. Protocol 7 meant releasing chemical stimulants into Gorath's system, drugs that would drive the mammoth into an uncontrollable killing frenzy. The creature would attack anything that moved, including its handlers if necessary. She felt Gorath's body tense as the invisible chemicals began to take effect. The mammoth's eyes grew wild and unfocused. Its gentle touch became a crushing grip around Maya's arm. The creature reared back on its hind legs and trumpeted a sound of pure rage that made the arena walls vibrate. Maya had perhaps 10 seconds before the drugs took full effect and turned Gorath into a mindless killing machine. As the mammoth's grip tightened around her arm, she did something that no Zephyrian had ever expected. She began to sing. It was an old lullaby her grandmother had sung to her as a child, a simple melody in Mandarin about a little elephant who had lost its way home. Her voice was clear and sweet, cutting through Gorath's drugged rage like a blade through darkness. The mammoth hesitated, its trunk loosening slightly around Maya's arm. The familiar rhythm of the song seemed to penetrate the chemical haze clouding its mind. Maya continued singing, pouring all her love and compassion into the ancient words. In the stands, the Zephyrians watched in stunned silence as their perfect executioner wavered between fury and confusion. Some began to mutter that the human possessed forbidden mind control technology. Others whispered that she might be some sort of witch or sorceress from the outer systems. But Maya was neither a technologist nor a sorceress. She was simply a human doing what humans had always done best, refusing to give up hope even in the face of certain death. The chemical stimulant surged through Gorath's bloodstream like liquid fire, but Maya's song created an unexpected interference pattern in the Mammoth's neural pathways. The creature swayed back and forth, caught between the artificial rage of the drugs and the soothing melody that spoke to deeper, older instincts. Maya stepped closer, maintaining eye contact with the confused giant. She could see the battle raging behind those red eyes, the primal fury of the chemicals warring against the creature's natural intelligence. Gently, she placed her free hand against Gorath's massive forehead, right between its eyes. The contact sent a shock through both beings. Maya felt the mammoth's pain, its loneliness, its confusion at being forced to kill again and again, and somehow, impossibly, Gorath seemed to sense Maya's compassion, her genuine desire to help rather than harm. Emperor Zorthus was screaming orders from his throne, but his voice seemed to come from very far away. The crowd had fallen completely silent, transfixed by the impossible scene unfolding before them. A human, the weakest and most despised species in the known galaxy, was somehow calming their most fearsome weapon. "That's it," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible but somehow carrying to every corner of the arena. "You don't have to be their monster anymore. You can choose who you want to be." The drugs were powerful, designed to override every natural instinct the mammoth possessed. But they had been created by Zephyrian scientists who understood only dominance and control. They had never accounted for the one force that could penetrate their chemical manipulation: genuine love and understanding. Gorath's trunk uncurled from around Maya's arm and instead traced gentle patterns in the air around her face. The mammoth's breathing began to slow, becoming deep and regular instead of the harsh, rapid gasps of artificial rage. Its eyes cleared slightly, focusing on Maya with something approaching wonder. Guard Captain Vorthak was frantically pressing buttons on his control panel, trying to activate backup systems that would force Gorath back into a killing frenzy. But the mammoth's biometric readings were unlike anything he had ever seen. The creature's brain patterns showed a strange harmonic resonance, as if the human's presence was somehow synchronizing with its neural activity. "Impossible," Vorthak muttered. "The readings show affection. How can this creature feel affection for its intended victim?" High in the royal box, Emperor Zorthus was consulting with his chief scientist, an ancient Zephyrian whose scales had turned silver with age. The scientist studied the biometric data streaming from Gorath's implanted sensors, his four eyes darting rapidly across holographic displays. "My emperor," the scientist said slowly, "I believe we are witnessing a phenomenon that our science cannot explain. The human appears to be communicating with Gorath on a level we did not know existed." "Impossible," Zorthus roared. "Humans are intellectually inferior. Their brains are primitive compared to ours. How could they possess abilities we lack?" The scientist's reply was lost as a new sound filled the arena. Gorath was humming, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from the very core of its being. The sound was hauntingly beautiful, like the song of some ancient god, and Maya, impossibly, was humming along in perfect harmony. The melody they created together was unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever heard. It spoke of loneliness transformed into connection, of pain transformed into healing, of hate transformed into love. It was a song that transcended species barriers and touched something fundamental about the nature of consciousness itself. Throughout the arena, Zephyrians began to feel something they had not experienced in centuries: doubt. Their entire civilization was built on the principle of intellectual superiority, on the belief that their larger brains and advanced technology made them inherently better than all other species. But here was a human, supposedly the most primitive being in the galaxy, accomplishing something that their greatest scientists had deemed impossible. Maya felt tears streaming down her face as she shared this moment of perfect understanding with Gorath. The mammoth's pain was becoming her pain, its loneliness her loneliness. But in that sharing, both of them found something neither had possessed before: hope. The drugs were still in Gorath's system, still pushing the creature toward violence. But now Maya's presence provided an anchor, a point of stability that allowed the mammoth to resist the chemical manipulation. Together they were stronger than the sum of their parts. Slowly, majestically, Gorath lowered itself to its knees in front of Maya. The gesture was unmistakably one of respect, a voluntary submission not to a master but to a friend. The mammoth's trunk curled protectively around Maya's small form, shielding her from the hostile gazes of the crowd. The arena erupted in chaos. Thousands of Zephyrians were on their feet, shouting contradictory orders and opinions. Some demanded that the execution proceed immediately. Others called for investigation into what they perceived as human trickery. A few very quietly began to wonder if perhaps their assumptions about human inferiority might be wrong. But Maya heard none of it. In the protective shadow of Gorath's embrace, she was planning their next move. Because she knew that this moment of connection, beautiful as it was, would not be enough to save either of them. The Zephyrians would not allow their carefully constructed worldview to be challenged by one small human and a rebellious mammoth. Emperor Zorthus descended from his royal box to the arena floor, his golden scales blazing with fury. His personal guard flanked him, 20 of the largest and most fearsome Zephyrian warriors in the Empire. Each carried weapons capable of bringing down a starship, and their target was one small human girl and her unlikely protector. Enough of this mockery, Zorthus bellowed, his voice amplified to shake the arena walls. Human, you will release our sacred executioner from whatever spell you have cast, or we will kill you both with extreme prejudice. Maya stood slowly. Gorath's protective trunk still curled around her. The mammoth sensed the approaching danger and rumbled deep in its chest, a sound that spoke of barely contained power. The chemical stimulants were still affecting the creature, but now its protective instincts were focused on keeping Maya safe rather than destroying her. Your Majesty, Maya called out, her voice clear and steady despite the terror she felt. I haven't cast any spell. I've simply shown Gorath the kindness that every living being deserves. The Emperor's 4 eyes narrowed with contempt. Kindness? You speak of kindness to a weapon of execution? Your primitive human brain cannot comprehend the sophisticated conditioning that created this perfect killer. Perfect killer? Maya stepped forward, Gorath moving with her like a living mountain. Look at him, Your Majesty. Really look. Does he seem like a killer to you right now? Indeed, Gorath appeared anything but murderous. The great mammoth moved with careful grace, ensuring that Maya was never in danger from its massive bulk. Its eyes, so recently filled with drugged rage, now showed alert intelligence and something that looked remarkably like contentment. Guard Captain Vorthak approached from the side, his weapon trained on Maya. My lord, perhaps we should simply eliminate the human and recondition Gorath using more intensive methods. No, the Emperor said slowly, his scientific curiosity beginning to override his rage. I want to understand what happened here. Human, explain to me how you accomplished this impossible feat. Maya took a deep breath, knowing that her next words could determine not just her fate, but potentially the relationship between humans and Zephyrians for generations to come. Your Majesty, you've made a fundamental error in your understanding of intelligence and consciousness. The crowd hissed at this apparent insult to their emperor, but Zorthus raised a hand for silence. Explain yourself, human. You measure intelligence only by brain size and computational ability, Maya continued. But consciousness isn't just about processing power. It's about connection, empathy, the ability to understand and relate to other beings. These are things that can't be measured in neural pathways or calculated in algorithms. Emperor Zorthus's scales rippled with incredulous laughter. You claim that your inferior human brain possesses capabilities that ours lack? This is absurd beyond measure. Not superior capabilities, Maya corrected. Different ones. Your people have spent so long focusing on intellectual dominance that you've forgotten how to simply connect. You've turned Gorath into a weapon because you see everything in terms of power and control. But he's not a weapon. He's a living being with thoughts and feelings and needs. As if to emphasize her point, Gorath gently nuzzled Maya's shoulder with his trunk. The gesture so tender that several Zephyrians in the crowd gasped in surprise. They had never seen their sacred executioner display anything resembling affection. Impossible, muttered the Emperor's chief scientist. Our conditioning protocols were designed to eliminate all emotional responses except aggression. You can suppress emotions, Maya said, but you can't destroy them completely. They're part of what makes any creature truly alive. Gorath has been lonely and in pain for years, forced to kill when every instinct told him to protect and nurture. I didn't cast a spell or use any technology. I just recognized his pain and offered him friendship. A young Zephyrian in the crowd, barely more than a child by their standards, suddenly spoke up. But if the human is right, then we've been torturing Gorath all these years. His parent quickly silenced him, but the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted. Throughout the arena, Zephyrians began to murmur among themselves. Some dismissed Maya's words as human nonsense, but others found themselves looking at Gorath with new eyes. Emperor Zorthus sensed the shifting mood and knew he had to act quickly to maintain order. Regardless of your claims, human, you have committed a crime against our sacred laws. The sentence remains death. He gestured to his guards, who began to advance with weapons raised. But as they moved toward Maya and Gorath, something unexpected happened. The mammoth stepped protectively in front of Maya, his massive bulk creating an impenetrable barrier between her and her would-be executioners. "Stand down, Gorath," Vorthak commanded. "Return to your conditioning immediately." The mammoth turned his great head toward the guard captain, and for the first time in decades, Gorath made a choice. He shook his head slowly from side to side, a gesture of clear refusal. The crowd fell completely silent as the implications sank in. Their perfect weapon had just defied a direct order. "You see," Maya said softly, "he's not your weapon anymore. He's choosing to protect rather than destroy. That's what consciousness really means, the ability to choose your own path." Emperor Zorthus was trembling with rage, but underneath the anger, Maya could see something else. Fear. Fear that everything his civilization believed about itself might be wrong. Fear that a supposedly inferior species had just demonstrated capabilities that the mighty Zephyrian Empire lacked. The Emperor raised his own weapon, a crystalline energy projector, capable of punching through starship armor. "If Gorath will not execute you, then I will do it myself." But as Zorthus took aim, Maya did something that no one in the arena expected. She stepped out from behind Gorath's protective bulk and walked directly toward the Emperor, her hands raised but not in surrender. In friendship. Maya walked toward the Emperor with the same calm confidence she had shown when approaching Gorath. Behind her, the great mammoth trumpeted anxiously, clearly wanting to protect her but respecting her choice to face this danger alone. The arena held its collective breath as the small human approached the most powerful being in the Zephyrian Empire. "Stay back, human," Emperor Zorthus warned, his weapon crackling with deadly energy. "I will not hesitate to destroy you." "I know you won't hesitate," Maya replied, continuing her steady approach. "But before you do, I want you to understand something important. You're not just executing a human criminal today. You're executing the future of your entire species." The Emperor's four eyes narrowed dangerously. "Explain yourself quickly, before I lose what little patience remains." Maya stopped just outside the range of the Emperor's weapon, close enough to speak without shouting but far enough to show she wasn't threatening him. "Your Majesty, when was the last time your people discovered something truly new? When did you last experience genuine wonder or joy, or the satisfaction of overcoming an impossible challenge?" "We are the most advanced civilization in the galaxy," Zorthus replied coldly. "We have conquered faster than light travel, mastered genetic engineering, built an empire spanning thousands of worlds. All through conquest and domination," Maya said. "But what about growth? What about evolution? Your people have become so focused on maintaining superiority that you've stopped learning. Stopped growing, stopped becoming more than you were." The crowd was listening intently now, even the Emperor's guards lowering their weapons slightly to hear her words. Maya could see confusion and uncertainty in their alien faces. These were concepts they had never considered before. "You want to know the real reason I was able to connect with Gorath?" Maya continued. "It's because humans never stopped learning how to be vulnerable. We never forgot that strength sometimes comes from admitting weakness, that wisdom sometimes comes from acknowledging ignorance." Emperor Zorthus laughed harshly. "You speak of weakness as if it were a virtue. This is precisely why humans are inferior. Is it weakness that allowed me to calm your greatest weapon?" Maya challenged. "Is it weakness that brought Gorath to his knees in friendship rather than defeat? Or is it perhaps a different kind of strength, one that your people have forgotten how to recognize? The Emperor's weapon wavered slightly. Around the arena, Maya could see Zephyrians exchanging uncertain glances. Some were nodding slowly as if her words were awakening thoughts they had long suppressed. "Your empire is dying, Your Majesty," Maya said gently, "not from external threats or resource depletion, but from stagnation. When was the last time one of your people created something beautiful, just for the joy of creation? When did they last help someone simply because it was the right thing to do?" "We rule through order and efficiency," Zorthus protested, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "You rule through fear and isolation," Maya corrected. "Every species in this galaxy fears you, but none of them respect you. None of them love you. And deep down, your own people are terrified too, terrified of showing any weakness, any emotion, any humanity." The word humanity sent a ripple through the crowd. In their language, it was often used as a synonym for primitive behavior, but Maya had somehow invested it with new meaning. "What are you proposing, human?" the Emperor asked, his weapon still raised but no longer aimed directly at her. "Partnership," Maya said simply. "Not conquest, not submission, but cooperation. Humans have something your people need. The ability to connect, to empathize, to find strength in vulnerability. And you have things we need. Technology, knowledge, resources. Together we could accomplish things neither of us could achieve alone." "Impossible," Vorthak interjected. "Humans are intellectually inferior. They could never be true partners to the Zephyrian Empire." Maya turned to face the guard captain. "Captain Vorthak, what is the primary problem facing your military forces right now?" Vorthak looked surprised by the question. Why would you care about our military concerns?" "Humor me," Maya said with a slight smile. "Rebellion in the outer systems," Vorthak admitted reluctantly. "We have the technology to crush any uprising, but new rebellions keep appearing faster than we can suppress them. And why do you think that is?" "Because the conquered species are too primitive to understand the benefits of Zephyrian rule," Vorthak replied automatically. "Or," Maya suggested, "because they're responding to being treated as inferior rather than as partners. You've tried to rule through fear and force for centuries. How's that working out for you?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the arena. Everyone present knew that the rebellion problem was growing worse, not better. Despite increasingly harsh suppression efforts. "What would you have us do?" Emperor Zorthus asked, and Maya could hear genuine curiosity beneath his imperial arrogance. "Try something revolutionary," Maya said. "Try treating other species as equals. Try listening to their concerns. Try building relationships based on mutual benefit rather than submission. And you believe humans could teach us these techniques?" "I believe humans could help you remember what you've forgotten," Maya corrected. "Your people weren't always conquerors, Your Majesty. Your own historical records speak of an earlier time when Zephyrians were explorers and builders, not just rulers and destroyers." Behind Maya, Gorath rumbled his agreement, the sound carrying a surprising note of wisdom. The Mammoth had been listening to every word, and his ancient eyes seemed to reflect understanding that went beyond mere animal intelligence. Emperor Zorthus looked around the arena, seeing his people with new eyes. For the first time in years, he noticed the fear hidden behind their expressions of loyalty, the weariness beneath their displays of strength. "And if I were to consider such a partnership," he said slowly, "what guarantee would I have that humans could deliver on these promises?" Maya smiled and gestured toward Gorath, who stood quietly behind her like a gentle giant. "Your Majesty, the proof is standing right there. An hour ago, Gorath was your most feared weapon, conditioned to kill without question. Now he's choosing to protect rather than destroy, to befriend rather than terrorize. That transformation didn't happen through force or technology. It happened through understanding and compassion." The Emperor studied the Mammoth with new eyes. Gorath had indeed changed, but not in any way that Zephyrian science could easily explain. The creature's entire posture was different, more relaxed, more alert, somehow more alive than it had ever been during its years of conditioning. "One example proves nothing," Zorthus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "How do I know this isn't some temporary aberration?" "Because," Maya said, "I'm about to ask Gorath to do something that will test everything I've just told you about the power of choice versus the power of force." She turned to face the Mammoth and spoke clearly so that everyone in the arena could hear. "Gorath, I want you to understand something. The Emperor is right to be skeptical. What happened between us is unusual, maybe even unique. You don't owe me anything, and you don't have to protect me anymore, the crowd murmured in confusion. What was the human doing? Was she releasing her hold over their sacred executioner? If you want to return to your old life, Maya continued. If you want to go back to being what they trained you to be, I won't try to stop you. The choice is entirely yours. Goreth stood perfectly still for a long moment, his red eyes studying Maya's face. The arena fell silent as thousands of Zephyrians waited to see what their perfect weapon would choose when given complete freedom. Slowly, deliberately, Goreth turned away from Maya and began walking toward Emperor Zorthus. The crowd gasped, thinking the Mammoth was returning to its conditioning. Vorthak's hand moved to his weapon controls, ready to resume command of the creature. But instead of approaching the Emperor in the submissive posture of a trained weapon, Goreth walked with the dignified bearing of a free being making a conscious choice. When he reached Zorthus, the Mammoth did something that no one expected. He bowed, not the mechanical genuflection of a conditioned slave, but the respectful bow of one intelligent being acknowledging another. Then Goreth turned back toward Maya and bowed to her as well, before taking a position exactly halfway between them. The message was clear. Goreth was choosing to serve as a bridge between two species, not as a weapon for either one. Emperor Zorthus stared at the Mammoth in amazement. Impossible. The conditioning should have reasserted itself by now. The chemical controls alone should have forced compliance. The conditioning is still there, Maya explained. But now it's balanced by something stronger. The knowledge that he has choices, that he can be more than just a weapon. That's what consciousness really means, Your Majesty. Not just the ability to think, but the ability to choose who you want to become. The Emperor's chief scientist was frantically studying the biometric readings from Gorath's implants. My lord, the data is unprecedented. The creature is displaying neural patterns we've never recorded before. It's as if entire sections of its brain that were dormant have suddenly activated. What sections? Zorthus demanded. The regions associated with creativity, social bonding, and autonomous decision-making. We thought these areas had been permanently suppressed by the conditioning process. Maya nodded. You suppressed them, but you couldn't destroy them. They're fundamental to consciousness itself. And now that Goreth knows he has choices, those neural pathways are rebuilding themselves. A young Zephyrian scientist in the crowd suddenly spoke up, her voice trembling with excitement. My lord, if this is true, then the implications are staggering. We could potentially reverse the conditioning on all our modified creatures, allow them to develop true intelligence and autonomy. But why would we want to do that? Vorthak protested. Autonomous creatures are unpredictable, difficult to control. But they're also capable of loyalty, creativity, and growth, Maya pointed out. Instead of having weapons that only follow orders, you could have true partners who choose to work with you because they want to, not because they're forced to. Emperor Zorthus was beginning to understand the magnitude of what Maya was proposing. You're suggesting we fundamentally restructure our entire approach to other species. I'm suggesting you rediscover who you used to be, Maya said. Your own historical records speak of a time when Zephyrians were explorers and builders, when you formed alliances with other species rather than conquering them. What happened to that version of your people? The Emperor's scales shifted to a darker shade of blue, a sign of deep contemplation among his kind. That was before we learned the harsh realities of galactic politics, before we discovered that showing weakness invites exploitation. But what if strength and vulnerability aren't opposites? Maya challenged. What if the greatest strength comes from being willing to show trust, to take risks, to admit when you're wrong? To demonstrate her point, Maya did something that made every guard in the arena tense with alarm. She knelt down and placed her weapon, a small ceremonial knife that all prisoners were allowed to carry, on the ground in front of Emperor Zorthus. I'm completely defenseless now, Your Majesty. By your definition, I'm showing ultimate weakness. But look around you. Look at your people. Zorthus did look, and what he saw surprised him. The Zephyrians in the crowd weren't looking at Maya with contempt for her vulnerability. Instead, their faces showed something he rarely saw in his empire: respect. Even his own guard seemed moved by her gesture of trust. This is what humans call courage, Maya continued. Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in spite of fear. Not the elimination of weakness, but the strength to be vulnerable when it serves a greater purpose. Gorith rumbled his approval and gently picked up Maya's discarded knife with his trunk, offering it back to her. But Maya shook her head. "Keep it, my friend, as a symbol that weapons can be transformed into tools of protection rather than destruction." The mammoth carefully tucked the small knife into a fold of his harness, treating it like a precious gift rather than a weapon. Emperor Zorthus found himself facing a decision that would reshape the destiny of his empire. Everything his civilization had taught him said that mercy was weakness, that compromise was defeat. But the evidence before his eyes suggested otherwise. "Human," he said slowly, "if I were to agree to this partnership you propose, what would be the first step?" Maya's face lit up with hope, but her voice remained calm and practical. "Start small, Your Majesty. Choose one of the rebellious colonies and try a different approach. Instead of sending warships, send diplomats. Instead of demanding submission, offer cooperation. See what happens when you treat other beings as partners rather than subjects. And if they interpret our diplomatic overtures as weakness, if they attack us, then you still have your warships," Maya pointed out. "But what if they don't? What if they respond to respect with respect, to trust with loyalty? Wouldn't that be worth discovering?" The crowd was listening intently now, and Maya could see that her words were resonating with many of them. The younger Zephyrians especially seemed excited by the possibility of a different kind of future. "There's something else to consider," Maya added. "Your current approach isn't working. The rebellions are growing stronger, not weaker. Your military resources are stretched thin. Your people are tired of constant warfare, and your empire is becoming increasingly isolated. What do you have to lose by trying something different?" Emperor Zorthus looked down at the small human who had somehow turned his perfectly ordered world upside down in the space of a single morning. Behind her stood Gorith, no longer a weapon but something entirely new. A creature that had chosen its own path and found dignity in that choice. "Very well," the Emperor said at last. "We will attempt this experiment. But understand, human, that if this partnership fails, if your people prove unworthy of the trust you ask us to place in them, the consequences will be severe." Maya nodded solemnly. "I understand, Your Majesty, and I accept that responsibility. But I believe you'll find that when beings are treated with respect and given the chance to choose their own path, they usually choose wisdom over destruction, cooperation over conflict." As if to punctuate her words, Gorith let out a long musical trumpet call that echoed throughout the arena. It was a sound of joy, of freedom, of hope for a future none of them had imagined when the day began. 6 months later, Maya stood on the observation deck of the Zephyrian diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge, watching as it approached the rebellious colony of Kepler 438b. The ship's name had been chosen carefully. It represented everything the mission stood for. Instead of the usual Zephyrian warship names that spoke of conquest and domination, this vessel carried a message of hope. Beside her, Gorith enjoyed the view through a specially constructed transparent aluminum window. The Mammoth had become something of a celebrity throughout the galaxy, proof that even the most conditioned beings could choose their own destiny. His presence on the diplomatic mission sent a powerful message. The Zephyrians were serious about change. "Nervous?" asked Captain Zenth, the mission's Zephyrian commander. She was young for her rank, chosen specifically because she represented the new generation of Zephyrian leaders who believed in cooperation over conquest. "Terrified," Maya admitted with a smile. "But that's okay. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you honest about the stakes." In the months since the arena incident, the transformation had been remarkable but not without challenges. The first diplomatic mission to the mining colony of Zarion 7 had been a stunning success. Instead of the expected resistance, the colonists had welcomed the chance to negotiate fair trade agreements. Productivity had actually increased once the miners felt they were partners rather than subjects, but not every mission had gone smoothly. The warrior clans of the Rigel system had tested Zephyrian resolve, launching several probing attacks to see if the Empire's new diplomatic stance was genuine or just a trick. It had taken all of Maya's persuasive abilities to convince Emperor Zorthus not to revert to the old ways of overwhelming force. Instead, they had tried something unprecedented. They had invited the Rigel clan leaders to Zephyr Prime for face-to-face negotiations. The warriors had arrived expecting to be executed or imprisoned, but instead found themselves treated as honored guests. The resulting peace treaty had been signed not in a throne room but in Goroth's enclosure, with the great Mammoth serving as a living symbol of transformation. "Contact established," announced the communications officer. "Kepler 438b is responding to our diplomatic channels." Maya took a deep breath. This colony was perhaps the most challenging yet. They had been in open rebellion for over 2 years, their forces led by a brilliant strategist who had handed the Zephyrian military several embarrassing defeats. If the diplomatic approach could work here, it could work anywhere. "This is Governor Thane of Kepler 438b, came the reply, the speaker's voice crackling with suspicion. "State your business, Zephyrians. We're prepared to defend ourselves." Captain Zenth looked to Maya, who stepped forward to the communication console. "Governor Thane, this is Maya Chen, diplomatic advisor to the Zephyrian Empire. We're not here to fight. We're here to listen." A long pause followed. Then, "Maya Chen, the human who tamed the White Death?" Maya winced at the nickname the galactic media had given Goroth. "I didn't tame anyone, Governor. I made a friend, and I'm hoping we can make more friends today." "This could be a trap," Thane replied, but his voice carried less hostility than before. "It could be," Maya agreed. "But what if it isn't? What if there's a chance to end the fighting and build something better? Isn't that worth the risk?" Another pause, then. "Permission granted for one shuttle, but know that we'll be watching every move you make." "Understood," Maya replied. "We wouldn't expect anything less." As their shuttle descended through Kepler 438b's atmosphere, Maya marveled at the beauty of the world below. It was a garden planet, its surface covered with crystalline forests that caught and refracted the light of its twin suns. The rebellion hadn't been about resources or territory. It had been about freedom, about the right to live without fear of Zephyrian oppression. Governor Thane met them at the landing pad, flanked by a dozen heavily armed guards. He was a Corellian, his species known for their diplomatic skills and philosophical nature. His face was weathered by years of warfare, but his eyes still held the spark of someone who hadn't given up hope for peace. "I'll admit," Thane said as they walked toward the Colonial Administration building, "I never expected to see a Zephyrian diplomatic mission. Your people aren't exactly known for their negotiating skills." "We're learning," Captain Zenth replied. "Sometimes the student becomes the teacher and the teacher becomes the student." The negotiations took 3 days. Maya watched as 2 former enemies slowly began to understand each other's perspectives. The Corellians feared cultural extinction under Zephyrian rule. The Zephyrians worried about maintaining order and stability across their vast empire, but gradually they found common ground. The breakthrough came when Goroth, who had been quietly observing the proceedings, suddenly approached Governor Thane and gently touched the Corellian's shoulder with his trunk. The gesture was so unexpected, so full of simple compassion that it brought tears to the governor's eyes. "He knows," Thane whispered. "He knows what it feels like to be trapped, to have no choices. But he also knows what it feels like to be free." From that moment, the tone of the negotiations changed completely. Instead of arguing about terms of surrender, they began discussing terms of partnership. The Corellians would maintain their cultural autonomy while contributing their natural diplomatic skills to help the Zephyrian Empire build relationships with other species. As they prepared to leave, Kepler 438b, now as friends rather than enemies, Maya reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy was still full of conflict and mistrust, but seeds of hope were being planted on dozens of worlds. "Maya," Captain Zenth said as they boarded their shuttle, "I've been thinking about what you said that day in the arena, about consciousness being the ability to choose who you want to become. What about it? I think that applies to entire civilizations too, doesn't it? The Zephyrian Empire is choosing to become something different, something better. And it's scary and uncertain, but it's also exhilarating." Maya smiled as she watched Goroth settle into his specially designed travel harness. The great Mammoth looked content, his eyes bright with intelligence and purpose. He had chosen to become a bridge between species, a living symbol that even the deepest conditioning could be overcome by the simple power of connection. "Change is always scary," Maya agreed. "But you know what I've learned? The best kind of strength isn't the power to force others to submit. It's the courage to be vulnerable enough to change yourself." As the Harmony's Edge jumped to hyperspace, carrying news of another successful diplomatic mission back to Zephyr Prime, Maya thought about her grandmother's old stories of human survival against impossible odds. Humans had always been survivors, but perhaps their greatest survival trait wasn't toughness or stubbornness. Perhaps it was the simple, revolutionary idea that even the mightiest empire could be transformed by the willingness to extend a hand in friendship rather than a fist in dominance. In a galaxy full of powerful species competing for supremacy, the humans had found their niche. They were the ones who remembered how to build bridges instead of walls. And sometimes, that made all the difference in the universe.